Ferrari V12s. Historically and statistically speaking, there was a time when every Ferrari used to have a nice V12 up front. Those that didn't were either fully fledged race cars castrated by racing regulations or were simply not worthy of the Cavallino Rampante emblem. Things are completely different nowadays, especially as we're quickly approaching the final days of Ferraris powered by 12-cylinder engines. Oddly enough, the first ever Ferrari had a V12 with a displacement smaller than that of a modern compact car, so it could have easily had fewer cylinders. But the 125s from 1947 started a tradition that even Enzo Ferrari himself somewhat imposed. Born at the end of the 19th century, Enzo grew up during the youngest era of the automobile, back when you needed brawn, not efficiency to go faster, and that made him stick to his credo for decades. Enzo Ferrari was pretty much the definition of old school cool during his entire time running the company that bore his name, which is one of the reasons he later became known as Il Commendatore. His autocratic way of running things made him a larger-than-life figure, and among his credos were things like aerodynamics are for people who can't build engines, or the client is not always right. Sure, some of the coolest and most expensive Ferraris, both old and modern, have had various engine configurations and fewer cylinders, but those that truly represent Enzo's principles only bow to the mighty V12 god. With that in mind, we've compiled what Il Commendatore's favorite modern Ferraris would be, if only Enzo would have lived way past 120 years. In no particular order, the first on our list is the beautifully impractical Monza SP2, which is a slightly more practical version of the Monza SP1 on account of actually having a passenger seat. Both the Monza SP1 and the SP2 are the originators of the so-called Icona series in the modern Ferrari lineup, a program creating limited edition cars inspired by classic Ferraris. With design roots that go back to speedster legends like the 750 Monza, 250 Testarossa or the 166 mm, the Ferrari Monza SP2 is priced at slightly over $1.5 million. That may sound a tad steep compared to a more mainstream supercar, but keep in mind this is not your average Ferrari, and only 499 units are to ever be manufactured. The humongous clamshell hood hides a naturally aspirated 6.5-litre V12 which delivers 799 horsepower at a stratospheric 8,500 RPM. This made the Monza SP2 and SP1 the most powerful factory Ferrari V12 road cars ever produced up to that point. The low-slung carbon fiber speedster bodywork of the SP2 features a pair of tiny scissor doors and lacks a traditional windshield or any other kind of weather-repelling feature for its two passengers. Instead, the supercar relies on a patented system Ferrari calls the virtual windshield, which deviates airflow away from passengers while driving over a certain speed. Ferrari's Special Projects program is known for creating ultra-exclusive models for special clientele, and the BR20 is one of these creations. The SPP Skunkworks team took a GTC4 Lusso and used it as a canvas to create the one-off BR20, which takes inspiration from past Ferrari Grand Tourers like the 410 Super America or the 500 Superfast. In other words, this is a unique, coach-built Ferrari that was commissioned by an unnamed, long-standing customer of the Maranello car maker, which is also why the price hasn't been revealed either. Despite being based on the GTC4 Lusso, the Ferrari BR20 looks completely different, with the shooting brake body having been turned into a fastback coupe, while its rear seats have been removed. Just like in the golden days of coach building, Ferrari's Special Projects fitted all new bodywork on the car, with new bumpers, exhaust tips, rear diffuser and headlights completing the package. The one-off also features a new interior with 2 shades of brown leather upholstery, carbon fiber and oak trim. Mechanically unchanged compared to the donor vehicle, the Ferrari BR20 still relies on a naturally aspirated 6.3-litre V12 that delivers 681 horsepower at 8,000 RPM, more than enough to propel the model to way over 200 miles per hour. Descending from a long lineage of front-engine, rear-wheel driven V12 Ferraris, the 812 Competizione is probably the epitome of a perfect modern Ferrari in Enzo's autocratic eyes. Under that sculpted, retro-inspired exterior sits a Ferrari 812 Superfast, with every little tidbit of its mechanicals having been turned up to 11.
One louder.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
The 6.5 litre block of the screaming V12 up front is identical to that of the donor car, but the internals have been refined and distilled for even more performance. Therefore, the 812 Competizione has redesigned pistons, new titanium conrods that are 40% lighter, and a new carbon fiber coating over the piston pins. The crank has also been rebalanced and lightened, and to top it all off, there are new cylinder heads and a redesigned intake manifold. All these not only make the 812 Superfast super faster, but were prerequisites to fully transform it into the 812 Competizione, a limited production, track-focused beast of a car. Its exterior design is inspired by legends like the 250 GTO, and despite being almost traditional looking from this perspective, it has the mechanical features to back up its retro looks, with things like active aero bits and rear-wheel steering keeping in check no less than 819 horsepower sent to the rear wheels. As another one-off, the Ferrari SP51 was tailor-made for a Taiwanese client who also happens to be one of the world's leading Ferrari collectors. Like the 812 Competizione is an 812 Superfast on steroids, the SP51 uses the architecture of an 812 GTS as the starting point, albeit its exterior design was customized down to every single detail by Ferrari's styling center. In other words, we are talking about another coach-built one-off that's been developed using wind tunnel testing to make sure that it is not only pretty to look at, but pretty good to drive fast as well. Compared to the 812 GTS, the SP51 has new headlights, bespoke wheels, and an all-new body, with the two buttresses behind the occupants looking like something out of a James Dean movie. Inspired by the 1955 Ferrari 410s, the model's livery is drenched in rosso passionale, 3-layer paintwork, and has a blue and white stripe that runs over the entirety of the bodywork and can also be found in the interior. Its 6.3 litre naturally aspirated V12 is identical to that found on the donor car, meaning that its owner has no less than 789 horsepower to play with. Just try not to lose any head garments through the Targa-style roof, okay? Only 599 units of the Daytona SP3 will ever be built, the only mid-engine Ferrari on our list, with each example fetching no less than $2.25 million. Design-wise, the model is heavily based on the Ferrari 330 P3/P4 endurance race car that won the 24 Hours of Daytona in 1967, but with enough futuristic touches to make it look like it spawned from the mind of a science fiction writer. Its overall shape perfectly encapsulates the spirit of sports prototypes of the 1960s, a reference point for generations of designers and engineers that worked for Ferrari. Like the Monza SP2 and SP1, the Daytona SP3 is part of the Icona series and is the most aerodynamically efficient car ever built by Ferrari without resorting to active aero devices. Somewhat unsurprisingly, its 6.5 litre V12, this time relocated to the middle of the car, is the most powerful V12 ever offered on a Ferrari road car. No less than 830 horsepower are harnessed from the powertrain, which huffs and puffs like an angry dragon and can scream like a banshee at up to 9,500 RPM. As yet another nod to how special the Daytona SP3 is, all 599 examples have already been sold by invitation even before its production started. Not only that, but all 499 owners of the Monza SP1 and SP2 have also bought a Daytona SP3, with the other remaining 100 examples going to private collectors. Outside of a Ouija board, there's no sure way of knowing what Enzo would have thought about these final V12 Ferraris, especially since he lived and breathed for racing, not making works of art on wheels for collectors. That said, there is no way he wouldn't have trembled at the sight and sound of these 5 almost perfect Ferraris, as any sane person would.